So, Bob, let's start out. How did you come to end up in this part of the state?
I had an uncle who lived in Maud, and I came up here. His wife got me a job at Ford Motor Company working in the cafeteria. I worked from 5 till 12 or 1. We fed 700 or 800 people a night. And I was down to hang out in Maud at a service station where several of us young guys assembled and just talked and spent some time. It was a township trustee came in one morning, and his name was Harry Fee. And he says, we are looking for someone to dig some graves that are second. They had 2 employees in the cemetery. Woodrow Stewart was the superintendent, or they called him sexton back then, and they wanted to know if anyone there could help dig a couple graves. Well, I'm an old hillbilly from Kentucky and real proud of it. And I said, well, I have helped dig graves, and I can dig graves. So that was the beginning, and that was sometime in March, to the best of my knowledge.
What
in
year?
1960.
Okay.
And I went down and helped dig those graves. They kept me around because the guy that's supposed to be employed in the cemetery never did show back up. So they kept me around. They paid me $1.25 an hour, and I worked from there at the cemetery from 7 to 4. I'd go home and rush to Ford Motor Company and work at Ford Motor Company from 5 till whatever time we got things cleaned up, and then ran the dishes and mopped and cleaned everything up. But anyway, I was there, started in the cemetery, and I worked. Paid quite a bit of attention. It's pretty complicated laying the graves out over there. They were different sizes, and at that time they were selling a 6-grave lot for $96, and they called them a family plot. They were 10 foot wide by 18 feet, 9 inches deep. You had 40 inches for each grave, so you had to pay what you're doing, or you're going to be on someone else's space. But anyway, I stayed there, or I worked over there for about three or 4 years, dug graves by hand. We did not have a backhoe. We did not have a road department at all. In the summertime, we had a 9-in Ford tractor that we would go out and mow some of the road right-of-ways. At that time, there's no fire hydrants or anything out there to be concerned with. There's no water in this area. And then I worked there for a good while, and they started a fire department, and me being available, I took training to be a fireman, and at that time I was the youngest man on the department. We took training down in Sharonville by chief of Evendale, whose name was Ed Gassert. We took training, and we started in October of 61 or 62, I think it's 61. But anyway, I started as the youngest man on the department, and in about close to a year or something, John Hunkler came on, and you probably know John.
Yeah,
he worked for
John.
50 years. John's been a good friend of mine before he ever started with the township. But anyway, I stayed with the fire department, and I moved up through the ranks. After I've been there about 6 years, I stayed with the fire department 18 years as a volunteer. But anyway, I took training and became a certified instructor for firefighting. And at that time, your insurance rate depended on your training, your equipment, your fire hydrant, and all of that. Okay. During about that time, they came through and put water in, and I stayed with the fire department 18 years. And during that period of time, we had about 8 chiefs. Pretty rough on chiefs at that time, seemed to be. But anyway, after the fire department they built a little building down on the corner down here, 2 bays, and a little meeting room on the side of it, and one little office in the back, and another little storage room facility in the back of that. and that was the only other buildings they had besides the township, or township cemetery buildings. But I stayed around till the fire department till they hired a full-time chief, and I already had in many hours with a PERS, Public Employees Retirement System, so I didn't want to break it. They would go police and fire, so I stayed with the maintenance department. But I'm going to have to back up. After 3 or 4 years in the cemetery, I can say at that time we had one tractor, and that was the only piece of equipment we had. After 3 or 4 years, they bought a backhoe, and we dug graves with a backhoe for then. But then they started moved me out of there and bought a truck, a snow plow, salt spreader, and I became out on the road most of the time. And I had one other employee with me at that time, and we did road work, dig ditches, and a lot of potholes and things. But at that time, we didn't have blacktop streets. We had tire and chip, and we bought another truck and then spreaders. And we could spread gravel on the tire, and we had a 600-gallon tire distributor. We'd spread tire and then run this gravel over it and run it in with a roller. And before that was our main road. We didn't have blacktop at that time. But anyway, the guy in the cemetery, he decided to retire. And like I said before, he didn't get along with the trustees, and he was Pete Stewart, and he didn't get along with the trustees very well, and he was kind of upset that they moved me out of the cemetery and left him there. But anyway, he retired, and he called Larry Gunler, and he said, "Larry, I'm retiring." And Larry said, "When, Larry?" Or "When, Pete?" And Pete said, "Today, G. David, today." and that was on a Friday afternoon. Larry got in touch with me, said, "We got a problem," said that we got 2 graves for Monday, and Pete just retired. He said, "Can you handle that?" I said, "Well, yeah, I would think so." And I got a hold of a couple of my employees, and we went and dug the graves and had things ready for the cemetery. But then
I have so many questions about what you've talked about already. So, Mr. Gunler was a trustee, correct? It was Larry Gunler?
Larry was a trustee.
Okay. It sounds like the trustees. So who else were trustees back then? Larry Gunler.
When I started, it was George Cheney, Harry Fee, and Milt Moorfield.
Okay.
And then from then on, they had many trustees, Larry Gunler being one of them,
Right.
Jim Williams being one of them, Bud Richards being one of them, and Dave McGinnis being one of them, and it just continued on.
So it sounds like then, at that time though, the trustees were very involved. If somebody was giving his retirement notice to a trustee, it seems like the trustees were very hands-on, day-to-day operations of the township. Is that true?
Yes, they were.
Okay.
I'll get around to that. And, but anyway, from then on, I was in charge of that. I was a superintendent of the cemetery. So, but I knew how to lay out the graves and knew the layout of the cemetery. And at that time, this section the closest over here didn't have a grave on it. That was just a weed field. We mowed it with a bush hog of it occasionally. But then they got the Trampler brothers. They got them, and they come in and blacktop and made the streets, and then we started selling graves there. But there was no graves there at all.
So that was the section closest to this building, our Township Hall building.
And then in the section over next to the creek, there was 2 or 3 big trees way up on the hill, and from there on down has accumulated, filled up. You know they don't have any graves that were available now, but then that was there then. So, but another question? I got,
I know you have a lot, you could talk
well,
forever, I know.
I think I told you I can do this in 20 minutes, or we can do it in 2 hours. But
So I find it interesting, so the trustees were very involved, but I also, so you were a young man in Maud, so what was it like just being a young man living in Maud? What was the community like
the
then?
community, they were, most of us country folks from down in Kentucky like myself, and I bought a house back on Lawrence Drive, which I still live in. We remodeled about 3 or 4 times,
Wow.
but the biggest reason we didn't remodel, didn't move on to some other house, is because we cared so much for our neighbors. But then I started out with just 2 men on the road, and we bought more trucks, and we bought a 600-gallon tire distributor, and had rollers on the back, put down 8 foot of gravel on top of that. We retired and chipped the roads ourselves, and they just continued to grow from there. And we bought a backhoe, and we dug the back. We come in and dig a grave in the cemetery, and then take our backhoe back out on the road. And then in the wintertime, we had the township divided up into 2 areas, and we had spreaders that we'd go out and take care of the main roads. Before that, the only thing they had that snow control was John Keehner, and they'd shovel grit out of the back of the truck onto the township roads where the hillsides and things.
Okay.
But
So I'm going to go back to Maud. Maud was the area at Cincinnati, Dayton, and Tylersville Road where the railroad tracks come through. What was there? So I think there was probably a store there because John Hunkler worked at the store.
John Hunkler worked there.
So,
the lady's name was Curly Ernst, and I did even some work for her, painted the roof and first one thing, the other, and about anything I could do to get a few dollars, but I helped.
So in the 60s, there was a store there.
Yeah,
Okay.
and a store in there, and the post office was back on the right side. There's a barber shop in the front where the main steps goes up through there, and the barber shop was there for a good while. But
was the train station still there?
no,
in the 60s,
just
it was already gone.
just the concrete slab where the train
already
station
gone.
was, and and it's also down in Gano, the place down there where the trains
Right.
stopped.
Do you know what happened to the depot? Was it just knocked down?
It was gone when I
was
came
gone
here.
when you
Yeah,
got here?
just a slab there.
So I think for people today to imagine it, so there was like this little town with a store and stuff at Maud, and then there was old Westchester, there was the Chester, the village, Mechanicsburg, or the variety of names.
Well, Hall's Carry Out, Ken Joseph had a little garage down here. That's where we'd take our problems. If we had something we couldn't handle in the cemetery, we'd take it over to Ken Joseph, and he'd take care. He'd get the mower back running.
He's in that little building, that was in the building
This side of the
where
bridge,
where the jewelry store is now?
It's the building this side of the bridge. I didn't notice
yeah.
on the right there, and his name was
All right.
Kenneth Joseph.
So there were like these little towns, Gano, but in between it was probably nothing, right? It was farms.
Farmland. Farmland. I knew the Baumans. They were excellent people. They were very, very nice people. The Keehners, the Russellows, the Hunter Laws, on the other heirs up on Barrett Road, and it was we had the streets in Maud, the streets in 3 streets in Westchester. I think there's 4 streets in Westchester, my side of the main road, and we had Gano, which hasn't changed in the last 60 years. So, but then moving along, they put it on a ballot for a park, funds for a park. Best I can remember, it passed by about 7 votes.
Okay.
And they bought Keehner Park from John Keehner, old man John Keehner, he lived up on Skyline Drive. I knew him, and I knew John. I knew John's kids. and they bought that park, and there's 128 acres of it, I think, and the 28 acres behind there, he donated that, and they paid him so much for the others. At that time, there was a trail went around back down through there, and down there, the Boy Scouts camped down there. But then from the picnic area around to where the ball fields and where all the rest was a more like a jungle than anything else. Grapevines, honey locusts with thorns on them 4 inches long.
So John Keehner that wasn't farmland that John farmed?
It wasn't, no, it
was just land he owned?
Wilderness.
Yeah.
Well, you couldn't even walk through it.
Okay.
And the trustees got it was a federal funded program, and it was called CEDA. And we hired 15 employees, and we had to go to Hamilton and pick part of them up. And we bought chainsaws and axes and all that, and we started cutting and cleaning that around through there. And they've cut the firewood up, and we sold firewood, seemed like $18 a cord or something, just in order to get rid of it. And we cut all that hillside out to they mow up there. And the park, the picnic area, the dozer that was pushing and piling some of that up, they called me one day and said, "Hey," said, where do you want a road to go in this picnic area?" And I haven't paid too much attention. I hadn't paid any attention to it. I went up there and looked things over, took a can of red spray paint, and that circle that goes down around there, I painted that off for the bulldozer, and with the intention of piling it off. And then on top of the hill, we built a overflow parking up there. And that was before the cabin and anything like that, or before the restrooms. And then we built those concrete restrooms. And we didn't have there's no water up there, and no electricity, but we put water and electricity in there. And those picnic shelters, we did a lot of things back then ourselves. Township didn't have the money to do really what they would have done. Now they'd put them out of contract, but we bought those shelters, and they brought them in here on a semi and unloaded them, and gave us the templates the blueprints to put them up. My crew put those picnic areas, those shelters up. We did that ourselves. Okay. And the two little ones that's up there, well, as Dave Gully said, I'm too conservative for my own good. And his remark was, "Well, if you don't spend it, I will." But anyway, that's another tale. But anyway, the overage, we made those two little shelters up there. That was just the overage from what we had left over when we built the other two. And then a seating area for the theater, for the stage up there, that was just a big long bank going up through there. And they was going to put seats up there. And somehow we got the responsibility of putting that seat in there. And Dave Gully was here at the time, and we had the blueprints, the drawing of it, and we started digging and putting those seats in a row at a time, and just kept moving back. And we had to backfill them with topsoil, and it got down within I don't know, a month or maybe a couple of weeks before the opening day. And I told Dave, I said, "We're not going to be able to finish that at the rate we're going." I said, I got several more rows to go. And I said, "How about us just opening that up?" And it was in the spring and then summer, and then it didn't get dark till 9 o'clock. So we opened it up to anyone that wanted to work over. And I had the blueprints. We had a transit, and we started laying those back. And I told the guys that was doing that, I said, "You put them in with a 16th tolerance, so that's transit." we finished it up, sod it, and watered the sod, and had it ready for opening day. So, and the picnic tables that's up there, again, we did our thing, did what we could to help the trustees, because the money wasn't like it is today. We built those picnic tables up there. I think it's about 20 of them to start with, to go down to those shelter houses that we'd built. But and somewhere along the line, they got McGuire Park, and we built backstops up there and ball fields and things. And
Can you tell me a little bit about John Keehner, just before we move on to McGuinness? So John Keehner, we knew they're a family that have been in this area forever.
Yeah, John was a very nice guy, very hardworking guy. He'd do about anything he could for the township trustee. Back when we had that big storm and things, anyone that had a backhoe or a front end loader or something, we had them out cutting and cleaning, doing road work. But John was a very, very nice, hardworking man, and I knew his wife Zelma.
He was very involved in Scouts, right?
And,
Boy Scouts
yeah,
were
and-
really important to him, and he wanted Keehner Park to.
Yeah, that was old man John. We got John and John there. So
Yeah, the old man John.
yeah,
Yeah.
and John old man lived up on Skyline Drive, where Lynn Brown, you probably know Lynn. Lynn Brown lives up there now, and old man lived there, and John lived on a farm over across from Lakota High School.
Right.
And
So the old man, he was the one who owned the land that became
Yeah.
Keehner Park, and
Yeah.
sold it to the township and donated part of
Yeah.
it. But scouting was very important to him,
That
because
was
the
his-
scouts had always used it, and he
and,
wanted that to continue.
a lady that was involved in that was Pat Holscher, Barb Chapel, Charlie's wife. I used to bother Charlie. I said, when you come around and put your hand on my shoulder, I said, the next thing I do is put my other hand on my billfold. But Charlie was one of a kind.
He was, man.
Yeah, but the Keehner Park, we needed parking space up there, so we laid off 2 to 3 different areas, and the sewer had just went up the creek, and become a big heavy storm and washed up gravel by hundreds of tons down on the curve down here. We hauled that gravel up there and based those parking lots in with that gravel, and then about fine gravel and choked it off and rolled it in. But what I'm getting at, we did a lot of things over our own self, our town, and one other thing in the park, those big stones that's down there that people just take for granted, they grew there, I guess. But anyway, just north of Tylersville Road, before the bridge, the railroad used to go at a different route through here. Those big stones was there, and we pulled those out of there with the backhoe. And in order to get them up on a drag, we'd pick up one end and we'd put rollers on them, and then we could move them up with no way in the world we could pick them up, because we didn't have that heavier equipment. But we pulled them up on our drag that we moved the backhoe from place to place, and we took them over there and dug a foundation, set those stones up, and my foreman in the cemetery at that time was Jeff Tuning, and Jeff had moved on. He had got a business cutting dates on stones or whatever, and Jeff, at no charge, the township ordered those plaques,
Right.
and Jeff recessed a place up there and drilled holes and put those stones in there after we set them up, and my mind can't really remember, but I think in the front of the center stone is a time capsule.
There is. I was going to ask you about the time capsule.
Yeah, well, we put it in there, but I'm pretty sure, I don't think we put it in the concrete, because there ain't no way in the world you'd ever get it out of there. But Mary Raffle, you know Mary was Raffle. She was very, very active in the parks, and I think she was involved in that. Pat Holscher was involved in that.
There's some names on the stone, actually, I might have a picture of it. But so do you remember when they buried the time capsule?
Yeah, we put the time capsule in there.
It was like 1979, I
Something like
think.
that,
It
yeah.
was supposed to be part of the bicentennial of the country, but I think it took a couple of years after that to get it in there. And it's supposed to be buried for 100 years.
Yeah,
And oh my goodness, that's forever. I hope somebody remembers it's there.
Yeah. That's like something else that's I have a tendency to believe it has been forgotten.
Yeah.
At the memorial service for the township, they put those 7 flags out there. Those are not just put there because they want to do that. Back in the early 40s, I saw the paperwork. Pat Williams, I worked very close with Pat Williams. For the first 25 years I was here, Pat and I sat down and we'd put the appropriations and the budget together for the cemetery, for the parks, for the roads. But anyway, we somewhere in the records, I saw it many, many years ago, that we requested permission to honor 7 unknown soldiers. And they give us permission from the federal government to do that. That's just not something else. And I have tried to bring that to attention, and I told Lee Wong, Lee being a serviceman, I have explained it to Lee several times, and I don't know whether you could ever find them.
We'll look for that. I know, there's a marker up there, I think, that says in tribute to 7 unknown soldiers.
Yeah.
And I'll do a little research into it.
But then the plaques, Jeff, he had sandblasting equipment. After we set the stones there, which was a undertaking, like building, moving the pyramids in Egypt. But anyway, we did it, and but like I say, we did a lot of things because. But anyway, we got
Probably
that.
Wouldn't meet safety standards today, but.
No, but then one time OSHA came out, and we had to wear. Then we started by having to wear steel-toed shoes and a hat and a vest and all that. I don't know whether they still do it or not. And but we got the parks, the 300 enough room for 300 parking in McGuinness Park, and we had softball fields and soccer fields and a volleyball and BMX track and the bicycles for and
the trails back there are still beautiful. They're just they're the prettiest trails. My boys grew up on them.
Oh yeah.
Back there all the time.
Yeah, Keehner Park. A lot of people like to go down in the creek down there and look for fossils. I know that they're not supposed to remove them, but I'm pretty sure if they find one, they take it out of there.
Yeah. So can we talk a little bit more about the cemetery? So there's the unknowns, which we should learn more about that. But how large was the cemetery really when you took over, when you started working there?
The closest section to us was a weed field, and there were many lots in the next section over. Those trees that's over there in the first 3 sections, I don't like to use the word but Milt Moorfield's uncle and I set those trees. And he did it kind of different than I did. I laid down a tarp and put my dirt on there, but he did it like a hen scratching a nest. He just throws dirt all over the place. But we set those trees. I was there, and then we had the big arborvitaes and things around the front. I set
Would
those.
that be like the late 60s, early 70s?
Or probably early 70s. No, the trees were planted in I'd say 63 or 64. And then we started selling lots on that, and before Pete left there. But at the time that I started working for the cemetery, they had a 6 grave, they called them plots. They called them family plots. You could buy 6 graves for $96. Not $96 a grave, but $96 for the family plot. But and there was a piece of ground behind the cemetery, and myself and John Keehner and Morris Osner and several tried to get the township involved. They belonged to Cincinnati Gas and Electric, and I felt like they would probably let us have it for a song and maybe even sung it herself. But Mr. Gully, his words, we want to get out of the cemetery. And I said, Dave, you're not getting out of the cemetery. I said, you just don't want. I said, now we're bringing in somewhere between $60,000 and $80,000 a year from the sale of lots and foundations and internments. I said, when you quit selling lots, you're not going to have that income. You're not going to have the income that we receive for digging the foundations. And I said, it's going to be, you're still going to have to maintain the cemetery and keep it mowed, which comes out of the general fund. But
right. So was the little chapel building ever used for anything while you were here?
The records for the cemetery was kept in that, and we used it as if we got cold or something. I had a little gas heater in there. In the cemetery, we never. A lot of people put a bad weather. They went to better weather to have internments, but we never backed off or anything. The coldest I ever had a grave there was we dug a grave on a Friday and went having a funeral on a Saturday, and the night that it got about 24 below zero, it was the year the river froze over. We had a grave that morning, an internment, and the two guys that's supposed to come to take care of it called and said their vehicles wouldn't start, and so I put on a lot of clothes, and we went. Myself and a vault man by the name of George Bell took care of that grave, and it 24 below zero.
Wow.
And
oh my goodness.
yeah, and I've never been back. I've been out fighting fires and at 18 below zero. Right. But we continued to grow and grow and grow and grow over the 40 years I worked here. Yeah. And when I worked here, before I retired, I had about 30 full-time employees, part of them for the park. I had a park foreman, I had a road foreman, and two road foremen really, right. And then I had a foreman in the cemetery. And
would you ever have imagined that in the 60s
when
when you first started that you would be...
no way, no way, but it was not all like a fire department. We had training. I had to keep all the records and things. But then in the wintertime, we played basketball up at Union School. And in the summertime, we had a softball game team, and we played Mason and some of the other teams around. Yeah. And one fall, after the baseball season was over, WLW had a group of celebrities and baseball players, and we played. It was fundraising activity for the Ruth Lyons Christmas program, and we played the WLW Good Guys on the field up here at St. John's, and I had the honors of pitching to Pete Rose.
Oh, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I got several articles.
So when was that?
Oh, I can't remember the year. They just 40 years now.
That's pretty cool.
I'm 82 and 82 years old, but I've been retired 23 years, and but the only time I've been back down here, I come down for Friday night programs occasionally, and I can't even think of her name. It replaced Mary Raffle. But
So you started to talk about McGuinness Park. Let's go back to McGuinness Park a little bit.
McGuinness Park was a very nice piece of property, and I never could understand what went wrong there. My opinion, and what most of everyone else said, that they traded McGuinness Park for a swamp over off of Beckett Road. So, and as you know, that what's up there now. when I started with the township, we had no banks. You had to take your check to People's in Sharonville or the People's Bank in Mason. No banks. No, and so there's a bank come in on John Street up there across from the firehouse, and I should remember the guy's name that was in charge up there, but it's now the organization changed name. And I think that was Society, I think, in it and that was the first bank that came to Union Township. There were no red lights in Westchester Township. Like I say, there was no banks. Repeating myself, but anyway, Evelyn's Kitchen was a truck stop, and the only other place you could get anything to eat was a guy by the name of Culver that opened a little place on 42 across from where Ted's Hardware used to be, and then there's on down the road. They would pass the nurseries down. There was a bar where you could get a sandwich or something, but that was the.
So where was Evelyn's?
Just this side of Cincinnati Dayton Road, Tylersville Road.
On Cincinnati Dayton.
Yeah.
Okay.
And that was a truck stop there.
Right.
So,
so McGuinness was actually part of Voice of America property.
right. Mm-hmm. And
were you here when they first got McGuinness?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, but McGuinness Park, like I say, we built the parking lots, and we did a lot of other things up there. But then we had restrooms up there, and we had.
There was a BMX course there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And that was back on Dave Tukasik.
Yeah.
Dave Tukasik was township trustee. One other thing that I shouldn't say I claim fame to this, but Dave McGuinness was township trustee, passed away on the golf course over at Baggett Ridge, and they had a vacancy, and John Boehner was a homeowners association president of Lakota Hills. John Boehner was appointed to township trustee to take care of. Hold on. See, I've talked the walls off. The walls. Hey, back to my story. John Boehner was appointed township trustee, and at that time, one trustee had the fire department. If a problem, fire department had a problem, they started with one of the trustees.
All right.
Police department, which was a volunteer police department at the time, Lynn Brown was one of the Bill Carlson, Jerry Hines, Jerry Hines, and a whole bunch of guys. But anyway, John was appointed township trustee, and John had my department, which was the parks, the roads, the cemetery, and the maintenance and on the buildings and all that. And but John would come to John was a young man, had two little girls and he would come to my office, and he would just ask how I did things. Like I prepared the blacktop contract. I had all the specs for the equipment that I bought and all that. And John would just ask how we did things and how we advanced the labor for the employees and things like that. Which at that time, I would sit down to Pat Williams, and we would take care of that. And you probably realize this: if I went and bought $2 for a screwdriver, or bought a $2 screwdriver, I had to get a bill. I had to stamp it. I had to put an account number, sign my name to it, and give it to Pat. And Morris Osner was a township clerk for a while. Bill Hanson was a township clerk for a while. And as you know, Pat Williams was a township clerk for 28 years. Right. By the way, Pat just turned 100 years old.
I know, we celebrated that.
I went there. They didn't have a real big doing, but I didn't want that. But now she's been stuck in a nursing home, which I hate. But Pat was a very near friend of mine. And
she's my hero, right?
Oh yeah,
She's,
but for probably first 28 years, we didn't have an administrator or anything like
Yeah, I was
that.
gonna say, so you really didn't have an administrator, you had more, you had assigned a trustee that was
Well,
responsible for that area, for that,
I kind of, like I said, I had more than well, I could handle it because I had some good employees to handle it to help handle it. But I kind of felt like it was my job to do anything that I could do for the general public, that they didn't have to go and complain to the township trustee. So I was the go-between, and I think there's about 54,000 people lived in Union Township at that time. But they, in my early years, they built a subdivision off of McCauley Road, Wilmot, Amelia, Sunburst, and Lois, and those. And then they built Elkwood, Birchwood, Fruitwood, and all that subdivision back in there. But then when we owned the fire department, we were forevermore burning down farmhouses and getting rid of them for subdivisions. But
kind of sad, but those farmers, they made money off their property and hard to support all that farmland, and it'd be expensive.
Stuckey's came in up on Tylersville Road. That was about one of the first restaurants. Well, Royal Castle, not White Castle, but Royal Castle, and it's the Ohio station come across the road. There's a road, another service station built on the west side of Interstate 75, and I can't remember the name of it, but it's a guy by the name of Harold Brazil who ran that. But
I haven't really had a chance to talk to many people about the tornado that came through, and that was in the early 90s, right?
Yeah.
Do you remember what year it was?
Not really.
Yeah, I'll have to look.
I never kept records of things like that, but the first week after that tornado went through, in 7 days, I worked 106 hours.
Wow.
And I was on the fire department at that time, and we got my employees in, took our backhoe over there, and anyone and everyone that we could find with a chainsaw cut and open that road up down McCauley Road, past Sunburst and up over the hill there. And when we looked across there, it was, houses were just tore. Well, you've seen tornado signs before, and I just knew they dead and dying all over the place. And at that time, I was doing the job of a fireman, I guess, but then it changed to the cleaning the roads up, and it was a field on the right down there that let us pile anything up that we wanted to and burn it, and we took care of it. And they had a big retirement party for me, a lot more than I expected. And Morris Osner, he was one of the original firemen. He was township trustee. He was clerk. At the first time when we had fire department, we had telephone lines to about 4 different places. Gene Russello's wife, and Morris's wife, Jessie, and there was 2 others, and they took a week about answering the phone, and we had what they call plectrons at home.
Right.
And we came from home, from the ones in the area picked up a fire truck, and we went to fire. But anyway, Morris Osner, I'd known him for many, many, many years, him and Jessie. And, well, maybe I shouldn't say this, but Morris had 2 sons.
Yeah, it's interesting how I think, especially in the in the fire department, it felt very family oriented. So, the man of the house was the firefighter, but the calls came in at home, and the wives helped do that, and I thought it was really interesting.
Yeah, my plectron could get on. I would go off, and I'd get up and go to the fire and come back and go back to bed. My wife would never know it. Because she got used to it. But
isn't that funny?
Yeah, but
so we're sitting in Township Hall, and this wasn't always here. So do you remember when they built this building?
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. This, I think I've told you, this was a cornfield. they leased it out to hunter laws over here for, I don't know the money amount of money, but the hunter laws farmed this forever, and then they built a little firehouse down on the other four corner.
Right.
This land, the township trustees got it for a very small amount, maybe a donation, and it was supposed to be used for future development for the cemetery.
Okay.
Well, it wasn't tied up properly in the deed, and they built a little firehouse down there, and they got some static from different people on that, and then they built the bigger firehouse, and then they built the administration building here, and there's no room for the cemetery, and then now they run out of graves for the cemetery, and and they took all the beautification of the greenery and arborvitaes and all that, and made another couple hundred graves over there, and they sold out pretty good. So right now, if you can, the only way you can get a grave in there, find somebody else that already has one that's not going to use it and get that. But
So let's talk about, it seems like everybody in the community has some memory of Mary Raffle, right? She was kind of a public figure, and talk a little bit about Mary and working with her.
Mary was very, very dedicated to the parks, and she was instigating getting that cabin McGuire built, and she spent a lot of times with different programs, and she was worked continuously working for the fire department. And Mary was a great employee and did a lot for the parks and things.
Yeah.
And
I think we have some pictures of we're doing some restoration work on that cabin right now. Yeah, it's going to look different, but we have a preservationist. They're restoring it the way that the National Park Service recommends you restore them. So it's going to have siding on most of it, just to protect the logs, and then on the inside you'll still see the logs. But I think we have pictures of you. You helped build that, didn't you? Put it back together.
Yeah.
So it came just on trucks and stuff, right?
Oh, yeah.
With pieces.
It came out of Indiana, up in Indiana. I don't know how Mary. I can't remember the guy but he took a trailer up there, and they loaded it. Took the old log house down, but a lot of the logs. At the time they went to get it, it was a 2-story log house, and but the logs had deteriorated to the point that they couldn't use them and they picked out the best logs and built a cabin with them up there. And I've got a picture. I built a log house down in Kentucky, but I got a picture up there of someone took a picture. He's kind of down low. Took a picture of the cabin. And in the back was the moon.
Oh.
And I framed that and it hangs in the cabin down there. So, but Mary, she was a very dedicated person. I worked 40 years. I can name a whole lot of trustees, and I can name about all the firemen and all the chiefs. Gerald Dawkins was the first chief, and then George Hall and Pete Stewart and Hugh Bellamy. And
Deathridge was the first full-time.
Definitely. Well, when they decided to make a full-time chief, I just kind of backed out, and 2 or 3 guys went for the fire chief's position, and Jim got the police chief position. But at that time, Jim and I were the assistant chief, and George Hall was the chief.
So tell me about, you were talking a little bit about when you were on the fire service, and there was an old station wagon. Somebody had a station wagon that they equipped for a medic unit?
Before the fire department, like I say, when I started working for the township, it was myself and Woodrow Stewart, who was a sexton of the cemetery, superintendent. But anyway, it was a guy by the name of Bill Fisher, had a 58 Ford station wagon. They took the seats out of it, and I believe they paid him $100 a month, and about the only time you'd ever see you see Bill. Lakota High School opened up about that time, and he would go to the baseball games and the football games and basketball games, and the intention was he was there to take a injured player to Mercy Hospital in Hamilton. That was before any of the other hospitals were around here. So, and
$100 a month was a lot of money.
oh yeah, but you didn't see much of Bill, but I knew him, but I knew all the farmers and the hunter laws and things, but
Sure.
but they wasn't nothing here. Like no red lights. I think I'm repeating myself, but there was not a red light, no banks, just a couple restaurants. And
So what was Old Westchester like in the 60s and 70s?
Old Westchester had Hall's Carryout, Charlie Salzman, who was a township clerk at one time, or in fact, he's township clerk when I was hired. He had a hardware store up there, and Russell O's had seed, feed, and fertilize.
Oh, that's right, the feed barn up
Yeah,
there.
down
that way.
this way,
That
yeah,
way,
yeah.
sure.
But anyways, that was an old man, C.H. Charles Henry. Gene he done some farming and around there with horses, and but the old man you go down there after a straw or a bale of straw or seed, or we bought some concrete down there and shovels or anything we need. You went down there, and then Ted's Hardware came in up on 42, and it was there for a while. But you could about anything you were looking for, you could find up Charlie Salzman's. But
Yeah, the feed barn was there for a long time.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
well, then the Amish built the
imagine.
new one over there, and that was Jim Russell. That was Gene's son.
Okay, yeah.
C.H. Charlie. Well, it was the old man's grandson, and the Amish put that up there, and then they took that back down and moved it on to somewhere else. But
So you were here when, so I think I was coming in kind of when you retired, but you were here when there was debate about the old Dudley Schoolhouse up
Yeah.
on Tylersville and Cox Road, weren't you? I mean, there used to be the schoolhouse up there where Walgreens is now.
Yep, that was it was a schoolhouse there, and there was a schoolhouse on Port Union Road, and George Hall, he lived on Port Union. There's a schoolhouse over there, and there was a schoolhouse on Tylersville and Westchester Swordsville Road. That was, and there was a guy up there that lived up there, and his name was Pug Muncie. Lived in that area. There is a
We
cemetery.
heard the stories about Pug Muncie, because he
And
sold water, I guess. It's supposed to have the purest water ever to make beer with. Is that true?
That's what I hear. And then after that, there was I can't remember right now. I'm not coming up with them. They had a pig farm up there, and the guy that run the pig farm, he picked up all the scraps like from General Electric and Ford Motor Company and all those big companies down there, and brought it up there and fed it to his hogs. And there's a cemetery back down this side of Tylersville Road. You turn to the left, go out there, and then you turn to the right, and then back another street. And there's a cemetery on the right back there that we cleaned up and got in shape where you could mow it at one time. But I bet that it's never been touched, and no one knows it's there but me.
There are several small cemeteries that we continue to maintain, so that might be one of them.
Yeah, I don't know. I haven't been back there yet, but I haven't heard it.
Yeah.
And then the cemetery on Dimmick Road, out on the right out there, that was overgrown at one time. And this same cedar program that we used on them to clean the vegetation off of Keehner Park, the picnic area, and the hillside and all that around there, they cleaned that part of that cemetery up over there.
We kept hearing about there was a subdivision. When a subdivision was built, some graves were unearthed because a lot of these farm families buried their families on their farm, and they didn't always So did you find? So I understand there
I-
were some
I
that
just-
were moved, some graves that were moved.
You know, like I say, I tried to keep. I was on friendly terms with all the township, with the trustees. Never had any trouble with any of them.
Yeah,
A guy by the name of Morgenstern, Ray Rosenberger, and
Sure.
all of those guys as township trustees. But anyway, that is off of Cincinnati, or off Hamilton Mason Road, and it's a subdivision back in there.
Okay.
And they wanted to tell me that, you know, being an old hillbilly, I know a little more about than the trustees did at that time anyway. They want to tell me there's 4 or 5 graves back there. I said, no. I said, if we have to move that, I said there'd be 25, 30 graves there. Well, we somehow along the way, we got stuck into moving that cemetery. And
sure it's not something you felt proud of.
well, I didn't feel at ease doing it, but we did it.
Yeah.
And we had, I think John Keehner or someone, I had a dozer, small dozer, and you scalp the ground, and you can tell the outline. The dirt from a grave never goes back to the same it was to virgin grace of the ground, as you know. And then we would just keep doing that until we got down where we thought the graves were, and we would take the remains and put them in a box and bury them in the back of the cemetery. But we wound up, there were 25 or 30 of them in there. But I can't remember the name of the cemetery, but
It's difficult because pioneer days, right? People
Yeah.
buried.
But that was something I didn't. I thought they should have put a fence around it and built a subdivision and
Understand that.
stayed in. Or someone in the back there got a house on top of the cemetery. So,
I understand it.
but I'm the goof that moved that.
Any other big projects that you were involved in?
Well, it's just general maintenance. You know that.
I can't imagine how the maintenance of roads and things changed over your
Well-
time here. Just
Well, I think I told you to begin with, we used, most everything was tar and chip, and we had very little blacktop. And then Greg Wilkins, who's the administrator or the
engineer.
he worked with the county, and I worked for the township. And a new subdivision goes in. You probably already know this. We after they put the subdivision in, we go out and inspect it, and whether can of red paint, anything, any hole, a place that's sinking, any curb that's broken, they have to repair. Well, they maintain it for 1 year, and then Greg and I would go out again, and we would check for anything that will need to be repaired, and then the developer was responsible for fixing that at that time. And then the township trustees would make a motion to accept these streets as township trustees, as township streets.
Right.
But Greg Wilkins and I did that. And then I don't like to use the word I, but I do, I guess. But I would put the program together for blacktop every year, and then we would bid that out, and it seemed like it's $200,000, $250,000. You know, it takes your budget down pretty rapid. That and insurance and wages and things like that, and then equipment, all that. I did all the doings on that, and truck. What we wanted to order in a truck, and we'd order a truck and snowplow and salt spreader and then calcium distributing system with them all at the same time. And
all that changed so much in your time here. And
oh yeah, quick.
I'm sure you had to learn a lot as you went, right?
Oh yeah, but I guess they never put anything on my back that I couldn't handle. But it wasn't all work, and I never took anything home with me. But I'm still busy. I've been retired 23 years. I've got 19 years in as a volunteer in Middletown Hospital, and do all the maintenance down at church. Like I say, I'm 82 years old, and I do the maintenance and mow the grass, keep things going, moving down there. And then I have a garden that I grow and give away about 80% of it to neighbors and
Nice.
church members and things.
Nice.
But
So you were here, was there a building where they housed the Rose truck and stuff before they bought the big building? They bought the big building while you were still here down the street, the services center.
under firehouse,
Is that where you put stuff?
under the firehouse on John Road,
Okay.
you could, my office consisted of a desk sitting back on the right,
Okay.
and we could get a backhoe in there, and by putting the boom way over, and then you could get the dump truck in there if you didn't have a snowplow on it. If you had a snowplow on it, you had to leave it outside.
Yeah.
And then then they built 3 bays behind the firehouse. They'd built the other firehouse they had, and behind the firehouse they built a 3-bay.
The little building that
Gra-
they use for cemetery now.
Yeah, well, then when they enlarged it to 6 bays, and then they put a nail, we put a nail on it, because like I say, over the 40 years
Right.
and when I retired, I had 25, 30 employees. In the summertime, I had more than that.
Sure.
But then we built a concrete box and put our salt in that, and we had a place to put sand in it.
Okay.
And then 4 or 5 years before I retired, we put the salt dome over there.
Okay.
And used to, we hauled our salt off the river with our trucks. I think we had 5 trucks at the time.
Okay.
And then that big ice storm that came through, I don't know what year it was, closed Interstate 75 all over. But I bought coarse sand from up off of Oxford State Road,
Okay.
off of 1788 Road, and we mixed that with calcium chloride and sprayed it on our roads, and we didn't have a road one that you had any problem
Good
driving,
deal.
because that calcium on that sand, the coarse sand, it just worked right in that,
Yeah.
and you had traction going anywhere you wanted to. So we kept them all open.
So the big building on Beckett Road, where our roads division is now,
Now
was that purchased?
that was purchased just about a year or so after I left.
After you left,
yeah,
okay.
yeah.
I remember taking a photograph at your retirement party, and I was trying to remember where that was, with one of the big red trucks and all the guys out in front of it.
Yeah, well,
It must have been somewhere else.
when I came to my party, all of my trucks and equipment was lined up up 2nd Street and followed me down to the retirement doing. So,
Very
but
fun.
that's April the 2nd of this year. That's 23 years ago. So.
Well,
but,
thank you for
yeah.
sharing all those memories, and I might call and have you come back in.
Yeah. Like I say, I just touch everything is a lot of it.
The Keehner Park stuff is really interesting to me because so many people enjoy Keehner Park so much now, and you were such a part of making that what it is today.
Yeah. There wasn't many things that we wouldn't tackle if it needed to be done, because we could all those shelter houses, they could have bought those and someone else install them, but we had manpower and had to be doing something. And
Well, you didn't have 200 roads to take.
Oh,
200 miles of roads.
and we, in the wintertime, we dug ditches that needed to be opened, and we patched holes and kept our snow plows and salt spreaders and everything ready. And if it's predicting snow tonight, we loaded up and was ready to go. And in 20 or 30 minutes, we had a system. They'd call me, I'd call 2 foremen and 3 foremen, and they'd call 3 or 4 guys, and in 30 minutes we was on the road. But and then the school bus coordinator, I should know his name, I'd call and get him out of bed about 5 o'clock in the morning or 4:30 or something, and he'd call me back every 30 minutes or so to see how the roads was. And he had 2 or 3 custodians that go out and check the road so he could make a decision on whether to call school off or not. So,
All right.
but.
So we'll go back. So you kind of reported to John Boehner when he was trustee,
John,
and he was kind of the one that was roads and things were part of his
and
work. And
John, he was just a very young man, and I never seen John get excited, or he he was just feeling his way along how I did things. So he would be familiar with what I did. But John started his political career as a township trustee.
Would you ever imagine that he would?
No, I wouldn't. No, I wouldn't. I've been good friends with John a long while, and he came out. You probably read the book, but the book ends when he retired from his political position. It was just a week or two after the Pope came. And John, I can't remember just how he said it, but it was he didn't think anything got any bigger than that, and I think he was having some difficulties up there too. But I had no problem with any of the township trustees, and the older ones are like Bitsy Schaffner, she was township trustee. Larry Gunler was township trustee.
And then who was the first township administrator that you worked with?
Mike Burns. Mike Burns.
Yeah, it would have been Mike, and then there was somebody else in there. And I know I can't think of his name.
Yeah, Bill Foster's son.
Okay. And then Dave Gully.
And Dave and I got along up to a point.
Yeah.
There's some things Dave wanted me to do that I just couldn't justify him, and
Sure.
And one of them, we were buying a 16-foot mower, big, as wide as this, to mow the parks. We had Keehner Park and McGuire Park, and they got a lot to grow. And he wanted to put air conditioning in. I said, Dave, I'm not putting air conditioning in. He said, well, why wouldn't you want to put air conditioning? I said, because I got 30 employees around here. I said, we have no air conditioning or anything else. I said, if I put air conditioning in, he said, I'm going to have one guy up there sitting up there smiling at the rest of them, and the rest of them peed off. I said, so we won't put air conditioning in it. And I didn't. But
then we got VOA Park up there, right? When we got all that VOA property, that was a lot to maintain.
Well, now VOA, we never we never did much of anything there. That was they township that was after I was here, but I understand that the township trustees that we just didn't have the money to develop that like they would have wanted, and they let the county have it.
Yeah,
they let the county have it. And used to go over and walk around that a couple times a week, but I haven't done much of that lately.
I should ask you too about things like Freedom Fest. So you remember Freedom Fest?
Very much so. Freedom Fest
again.
That was we had to put in pull in big generators in there, and we had a guy, and I can't remember his name. He lived up off of Delview, across from where Mary Raffle used to live before she was divorced. And but he was an electrician, and we'd run a big cable all around there, and all the booths had cable with outlets right behind them to set up, and then we had fireworks, and the park across the fence up there. The fire department was there, and just about every time we'd set off fireworks, they'd have to go across there and put fires out in a half a dozen different places. But then
it was a pretty big shindig. It was a pretty big
it was,
yeah.
And then after that, all the garbage and everything, we had to clean it back up and things. But I very much so remember that. And one other thing, when we built this bridge across here, and just before I retired, they had a big grand opening for that bridge, and Chris.
The bridge in Old Westchester?
No, the one that goes across the interstate.
Oh, Union Center?
No, Becky, or just go out in front of the cemetery.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, and
all right.
But then the bridge.
Okay.
Across the interstate there, they had a big opening. Yeah, Westchester, Florida, going across there in front of it goes up there, and I got a fifth of Maker's Mark sitting in my garage that Chris Winenberg. I work with Chris pertaining to a lot of situations, and I think Chris is still around here.
Yeah, he is.
But I got a fifth of Maker's Mark at home.
Yeah, Schumacher-Dugan was such an influence
on
the township and how it developed.
Bellman Brothers, there's about 3 of them on that property over there. And they own out on the corner out there, it was just before you get to, when you get the stop sign, before you go into the police department. A guy by the name of Frank Mingus on that.
Right.
And the big area but to the left of the cemetery, he farmed that, and several years he planted popcorn in there. He come in there and they come in there and pick the popcorn with a picker, and then they would leave a lot of it. And I'd take a 5-gallon bucket over and I had all kind of popcorn. But
I always kind of forget this, but this road wasn't originally Westchester Road by Township Hall. It was changed to Westchester Road because of the Union Center interchange, wasn't it? It used to
it
used to be something else.
Yeah.
Do you remember that?
Yeah, they've changed a couple roads over, and I
think when they built Union Center, they renamed this Westchester
But then
Road.
I go back. There's another schoolhouse sitting over on the corner too, just on the left on Frank, on the left corner, and then you go up Port Union Road. There's a schoolhouse on the left up there. But anyway, all that over there was nothing but farm ground, big farmhouses, and they were 3 Bellman brothers, and they were like like everyone else. They were very nice people. But there's a house over there that he rented, one of them, and he come over big snow in the driveway going back there. I had 4 feet of snow on it, and he wanted to know if I could take it back over and I could open. And I said, well, it wouldn't take me 15 minutes. And I went over and knocked that snow open for him. He tried to pay me, and I said, no. I said, I can do you a favor and maybe get by with it. But I said, if I take that money, then I got another problem. He said, well, I'll take care of you. About the middle of the summer, he brought a big box of sweet corn over and set it in my office. So those old fellas, you couldn't get ahead of them.
That's
so,
fun.
Yeah, but that.
So that was poppy corn that was grown there. That's funny. Very neat.
Yeah.
What fun!
Yeah.
Well, quite a career.
It's really amazing. You know, that 40 years from where I started at $1.25 an hour, and I think when I retired, it was about they put me on salary, and I think it's about $35, $37 an hour when I retired. And
you were happy for the $1.25 an hour.
Oh yeah, well I worked 2 jobs. I worked there and I worked at a cafeteria at Ford Motor Company. Right. But my retirement, way it was set up, I can't believe it. But anyway, I've had 19 3% raises, and I've had 3 2.5% raises, and I'm due another one in the 1st of May. And I don't know what it is, but I haven't paid enough attention. But
you're enjoying retirement.
I'm staying busy. Yeah.